Hi guys, welcome to my channel or welcome back. If you're returning, hello, and if you're not, hi. Feel free to subscribe if you're interested in any of these things right here. I just go over a variety of topics within a very, very long time. And I do these like podcast style hang out with me videos that end up being my brain just like literally hijacking and going wherever it wants to go. I don't have a script or plan any of these. I just turn it on and let it go. So how are you guys doing today? I am okay. I woke up way too early. I think I got about 4 hours of sleep, which is the lucky number of the 4 hours of sleep is truly my lucky number. Lucky star. I am kind of very hot right now. Oh, it's the beginning of October, which is cool. But I do have this fear within myself gathering in dark places of missing out on October. I have this idea to be Viago from What We Do in the Shadows for, how do you say it? For Halloween. And my husband was going to be Deacon. And because he reminds me of Deacon. And sometimes I act like Viago. I act like a dandy from the 1800s, okay? I do. I act like a dandy from the 1800s. um, it's funny, so whatever. I accept it. I'm fine with that. In fact, I love dressing like a 1970s vampire. This is my this is the look for the day. I can't show you the dress because I need to cover more of my bits and bobs. But I'm wearing like this silk dress and I have these very long bell sleeves and they're everything to me. I love dressing like this and I dress like this to sleep in. Mostly I have this fear of dying in my sleep and being ugly or something like that. It's the perfect yawning thing to have these gigantic bell sleeves. You could hide yourself from the sun. You could, fly away. They're perfect. They're perfect. They're so pretty. I love fancy lace too. It's very nice. Anyways, it's for me. My personality. That's Sven. That's my duck, Sven. I named him Sven because she is a Swedish duck. And so I was like, Sven. Sven. So last night I went outside and I stargaze. I have some night vision goggles that you can record on as well. It was something I splurged on because I found it to be valuable to look at the stars. And that's something I do. I'm an astrologer, but I'm also really into astronomy and stargazing. I'm into gazing just in general, I suppose. I also like art gazing, sun gazing, moon gazing. I like looking at water. I just like gazing at things for very long amounts of time. Sometimes I like looking into people's eyes, but not really, unless I know them already to an extent. But eyes are pretty, but I don't like looking into someone's eyes directly because I feel like I see things that I shouldn't see. I feel like it's a weird kind of intimacy that happens. Like soul gazing, and that always upsets me. That is always upsetting because you'll find things that you don't like, or masks upon their walls that you didn't know that they wore. But anyways, so I was stargazing last night and I was looking at Orion, and within Orion's sheath there are so many stars. There's so many of them. They're numerous and yet not countable. There's so many magnificent stars, and they're so fun to look at, and I don't know, sometimes I'll take pictures and I send them to my friends and I'm like, hey, look at this, isn't it amazing? And even the Pleiades, which right now is above my house at night, So I'll be able to like witness it traveling throughout different times that I'm awake at night. And it's such a glorious little cluster of, I don't know. The stars are so strange and beautiful. But last night I saw a shooting star above my house, and I kind of got shocked. I was like, it was so quick and fast. They're fun to look at. And it could have been falling space junk. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I like seeing little shooting stars. They're really, really cool. But there is, we live, so there is a lot of wildlife area around here, and we have a large amount of migratory birds. And following migratory patterns is important to me. I love watching just how culture and things shift and shape, and how mythology is spread to the wind and things like that, and adapted and improvised and written down and spoken and changed and things like that. But I also enjoy like not just watching animals migratory patterns, but also the migratory patterns of humans and the consequences of those things, um, such as different types of genetics popping up, or the mixing and creation of new things. I think it's extremely fascinating. Something that I spent a long time on was following the movement of like Germanic people, and also people from like Scandinavian people, and watching how a lot of the stories shaped and shifted the mythology of those places, of that culture and those cultures, because they're also two very separate cultures. But I find, and in my own research, a lot of the stories are very similar. There's very similar gods and deities. Okay, so I've spent many years and many hours of research, endless research on different cultures and different myths and stories of gods, deities, of all different types of people. Um, I find it really interesting and also strange, because there is a certain amount of war and communication that happens with adaptation to certain archetypes within each person's individual realm, like each country and family and things of that nature. Culture. There was another word I could say other than culture. It's not just culture, but so there are. There are things within each person's brain. There are archetypes, and I find it really fascinating when there's a similar thread running through an entire area. I guess a mass accepted truth. Like these stories are kind of like mass accepted truth. These myths of how things happened, and within each myth, there's always that psychological fruit that you could pick and eat and ingest and develop to understand more about each story. So I spent many hours studying Germanic people's migration and the effect that it had on certain areas of Europe, and also, like I said, for the people that lived in like Norway and Denmark and things like that migrated and went other places and left runes, stones, in areas, just to say that they were there. Just to be like, hey, they told us not to put carvings on this lion, and we told them to fuck off. Oh, by the way, Sven is in jail. Just the funniest runic carvings. And I also like listening to linguists speaking about the development of not just accents and shifts within speech patterns, but I sound so strange when I talk, and I see myself and I go, ooh, honey, you're giving away your loneliness. But I never felt alone doing research. When I'm doing research, I don't feel alone. I feel like there's something there with me, learning, guiding, watching. The observer is observing. Anyways, there's just really cool things that happen to stories and to humans when they mix and mingle and share. And then you can find very similar, like I said before, like I guess psychological archetypes that are within everyone's psyche to an extent. But sometimes those roles end up getting deeper or more shallow depending on the areas that you're in and how it translates to the values within those tribes of people. So one area might, for instance, really, really value Thor, and so they value all of the things he stands for because it's something within themselves that they feel that they recognize outside, within and without, as above, so below kind of thing. There's something within themselves that they can identify and observe and go, yeah, yeah, he's the one for the people. Then in other areas, the archetype that Thor represents less becomes less, or sometimes it becomes more. Like I said, it becomes deeper or shallow depending on the internal values of the people within that tribe and area. So I find that extremely fascinating, just listening and learning and talking to and sharing. I find it fascinating to share ideas, ideals, values, and things like that. And to learn from that. Just learning to me is fun. It's how I play. And sometimes whenever I do play via learning, it's at the cost of life lessons, and the consequences are kind of heavy on my psyche, such as getting myself into situations I have to get myself out of. Oops. But recently I've been going back to the stories of like Loki and Odin and doing more of a deep dive on those stories because I've done numerous deep dives and I have some reservations about Odin. I can recognize Odin very quickly within a culture or that archetype that he represents, very mercurial. I can recognize him. And personally, and this is not for everybody, but personally, me and him have issues. That being said, and I also, whenever you find Odin or that archetype of Odin, I find Loki's not too far behind, and he's a familiar face, and he's like a friend to me. So I don't mind anything he does, any of his shenanigans or actions. And I found personally through my own research that there's two major new themes I am starting to work with and understand about these two entities, creatures, archetypes within the human psyche and the realm above and below and everything, right? In between. Everything, anything, and nothing between Loki and Odin. That Loki is this divine outcast. He's this foolish person who only wants to make people laugh and be accepted for being any role that he can do in everything. He could do anything, everything, and nothing. But also, he's mischievous in a way. I think that we all are, and he's just more relatable to human beings because of his curious nature and his inquisitiveness, and then also getting himself into shit that he has to get himself out of, but bringing gifts. And he's just such a fascinating God, deity, truth, right? So with Loki, I don't feel any kind of anger or frustration towards, because I think that he's more understandable. I think it's easier to digest Loki than it is to go into what Odin is, which is a lot. So, and that's probably why they call him the Allfather, things like that. And I'm probably going to piss some people off because generally when you speak of things Nordic, there's a certain archetype of masculinity that likes to assert themselves and let you know how it's going to be. And I don't find it to be, it's gross. And there's a lot of racism that happens within Norse paganism. So it's a very difficult topic to talk about because there's so many layers. But the two layers I'm talking about are the ones I want to talk about. So Loki and Odin, right? So me and Loki, we're cool. Me and Odin, not so much. Not so much. Not so much. not so much. So I find that Loki is interesting because, in summary, all of his actions can be summed up into I will do anything for love and acceptance. Period. And Odin's actions are I will do anything for knowledge and understanding. Period. Those are two, this is what I wanted to talk about. The two major themes I am starting to understand in myself and develop an understanding for is the sacrificial nature of Odin and the sacrificial nature of Loki. So, like I said, Loki is this outcast who doesn't have any familial connections, and he's an observer and also a shapeshifter, and he does things to make people laugh, and if he can make you laugh he could save the world, kind of thing. And he does that in many of the stories. When you truly peel back these layers and you look underneath it, when you dissect the stories and you look around and see what Loki has been doing, you notice that he will do anything for love and acceptance. Those are the two main things, to be accepted somewhere. And they always mention that he is not truly a god such as Odin or Thor. He is different. He is he's a mixed, and he's all of these things. And then with Loki, there is a sacrifice of himself in order to be accepted. There's a true, huge sacrifice that he ends up making for love and acceptance at the cost of his blood brother Odin. Like, there's this pact they have between each other that is genetic in a way. It's spilling of blood and switching of genes. It's extremely intimate, having a blood oath, or intertwining DNA like that. It is acceptance. It is intimate. It is forever. So when you make a blood pact, oath, things of that nature, you are writing something, not just with your blood genetically, but you are it's like a spell it's very difficult to break. And then with Odin, you see that his sacrificial nature happens. Of course, he sacrifices himself on trees and things of that nature, but also he would do anything for knowledge, including sacrifice other people and lie and cheat and steal, and he is glorified for these actions. But Loki is not glorified for his actions. He is actually demonized or put in a lesser role because he is lesser. He's not fully a god, and he's not fully this. He's not fully a frost giant. He's not fully that. He lives with us because we allow him to, and yet he, even through his shenanigans, he creates more fullness and depth within all the gods. He makes them deeper. He adds to their myths, because without Loki and these myths, these gods wouldn't truly have myths that were worth listening to, because they wouldn't be interesting. So I find that, like, personally, I love that archetype of Loki. I love the archetype of the trickster. And the issue I have with Odin is that he would do anything for knowledge, including in some myths. And sometimes this pisses off some of those, like, skinheads or whatever, or like the white supremacists. They get pretty mad when I start speaking like this about the Allfather. But I mean, when it gets down to it, him and Loki fucked. They fucked each other in order for Odin to understand Seidr, or feminine magic, something that only happened with females. And so what did they do? They broke cultural taboos. Odin dressed like a woman. He became like a woman. He sacrificed, himself, not for love and acceptance, much like Loki does for Odin, but and for everybody. But he sacrificed himself, his ego, and things like that in order to dress like a woman and submit himself to the women's mysteries and initiations. And of course, Odin is also a trickster. He's a shapeshifter, but the flavors are so different. They're so different. And with Odin, you find, like I said, it's so interesting because the culture itself was really big on people staying in their roles, and women couldn't wear pants at one time, and they like the Norse culture, and yet they were also in charge of finances and stuff like that. So in ways they were progressive, and in ways they were strange. There's all these strange laws when you look back and you read the runes and you see how the things that played out were like you were not allowed to talk to trees, and you could not wear masks in graveyards. There's all these very strange laws which indicate, one, somebody was doing these things because they made a law against doing them. They don't just make laws because they pull it out of a hat and go, let's write this down and with runes. Perhaps they do. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't truly know anything. You know what I mean? Like, what is? I don't know. So personally, I wasn't there, so I don't like to really solidify, like, oh, this is fact. But it is funny to witness them saying, like, no talking to trees and no wearing masks in the cemetery kind of thing. Because evidently somebody was doing that. But with Odin, like I said, he submitted himself to divine femininity. So he submitted himself to this divine feminine experience in order to acquire the abilities that were at that time sacred to women. And if any person within the culture that worshipped him actually went out and did what he did, that was a big fucking no. Men were men and women were women, and there was a certain place for the divine masculine and feminine to switch, whatnot, within like war settings or other settings. But I think that it was legal grounds to divorce your wife if she was wearing pants. Well, butter my biscuit and call me a man. Divorce my ass. So I was like, what? But yeah, it's very interesting to see that. And yet they have this figure such as the Allfather who is doing, doing things that were not also culturally accepted, but he could do them. And he did do them. Or not, maybe not, I don't know. I wasn't there. But I find it extremely interesting that there is and also there's so many layers to this. I'm not just saying that this is my only view of Odin and Loki, but this is something I've been flirting with lately, is understanding that Odin would do anything. He would sacrifice himself, mostly, and anybody around him, even his children, anything, sacrifice anything for knowledge. And then we had Loki, who would sacrifice anything, including himself, for love and acceptance. To be a legitimate thing, and then you see Odin sacrificing everything to know more about the future, and then essentially and eventually he ruins everything. They're his own self-sacrificial thing, and I mean, he even had a wife, and there's not many stories of them being intensely and immaculately in love. I suppose I would suspect that he only married her because she could see. She was a very powerful seer, and she knew everything, but she kept quiet about it. And she knew her husband's downfall. She knew what was going to happen. She probably knew that he was fucking Loki in the background. She probably knew, but she kept quiet because she was just this elegant, divine, Frigg, this elegant divine goddess of a certain archetype, and she upheld that. But with Odin, like I said, he would sacrifice anything, anybody, anywhere, anytime, including himself, just to know. The insatiable pit within himself for knowledge was so deep and dark, it eventually led to the destruction of everything. He went too fast. He did too much. He didn't weigh the consequences. So it's interesting to see now for me that these two things are divinely intertwined via a blood oath or like even a sexual exchange, such as, Odin submitting himself to these mysteries. And, there are stories that indicate that they had a sexual exchange of some sort. Um, and it's so sad what happens to Loki. It is one of the worst stories. It's so sad. I spent a good solid 6 months in the year 2012 crying. Every night, at least once a night, over Loki's story. And sometimes I still cry to this day. So, the boy, who can be anything, anybody, anywhere, anytime, any place, for anyone, who can get out of anything, he can't go to the party. And if you know the story, you know the story of Loki. When he goes to the party and he starts telling everybody the truth to their face, not in riddles or metaphors or something more digestible. He says the truth to their face. I saw you fucking your brother, and I saw you over there fucking him, and I saw you, and I saw you, and you even fucked me. What does that say about you? So who are you really? He sat there telling the truth about everyone in not a way that was digestible. And then he was threatened, and then he ran, and he shifted, and he moved, and they bound him and locked him away and took his children and all of these things. And they turned his children into wolves and made them eat each other and bound him with the intestines of his children for speaking the truth. All of the guilt and shame and consequence of the one who needed love, the one with like such a high, powerful set of observation skills and a need to fit in. Finally was like, fuck all of you. You know what? Thanks for bringing me here. Now that I am here, how about you go fuck yourself? Have you ever thought of that? And because of that, he was like bound until the end of time, till the end times, when he finally escapes. And you can, like, he's under a volcano somewhere. And when the earth shifts and shakes and rumblings happen because of earthquakes, it's Loki trying to move because the serpent's poison's falling on him. There's so many different stories of what's happening. And there's so many different flavors and stories of what happened with Loki and what happened with him. And it's so, like I said, it's important to me to do research on these myths and legends and things like that, because within our minds, they're still extremely relevant and prevalent. So it's fascinating to see how Loki had shifted throughout time and space, and how Odin had shifted throughout time and space. And now me here, past the age of 30, after my Saturn return, I'm able to have these bigger thoughts about things I could go back to and expand upon. And right now I'm in my Norse and Germanic myth observation box, and I'm looking in there of all the things I've collected over the years with research and books and cards and decks and statues and things like that. I've done so much research. So all of the things I've heard and all the aspects I've heard, and from a female's perspective and from a male's perspective, from a Berkeley College professor's perspective, and then also from a perspective of somebody who just lives in Oslo. Somebody who just grew up hearing the stories from the community that was there. It's different hearing the stories from within the community versus reading a book written by an American who is outside of the community, and yet there's still some influence via maybe something from within that they felt resonating to with these stories, or maybe their ancestors come from there, so it holds a certain amount of truth. But it's to me, interesting to take my 30-year-old eyes and my 30-year-old brain and look back at things that I was so enveloped in 10, 15, 20 years ago, and expand upon them and find out that there's something further beneath the surface of what they just tell you. There's every myth has like, it's a portal to another realm. It's an entire world within a world within a world within a world, and exploring that realm of a myth or a character or a god or a deity or an archetype, it is so much fun for me, first of all, and also extremely fascinating because it can all be true all simultaneously, you know. I also spent a lot of time talking to people within, um, the Norse pagan community, or people who consider themselves Lokian, or somebody who follows Loki, or is a devotee to Loki, a child of Loki, uh, Loki's daughter, kind of thing, daughter, whatnot, or people who are extremely attached to Odin and feel a certain way for him, or feel that his existence has changed them in a certain way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just me and him have some issues that we need to work out, and it's just this thing, and I just can't right now. So it's and so all I'm saying, I guess, with this, I'm not saying that this is my only view on Loki and Odin and whatnot, but there are so many stories behind these two characters. But right now, the only story I'm truly interested in is the one that makes the most sense to me, at my point in time and space, and that is, the two truths, the two, pieces of the truth. That's not like the whole truth, but like there's a little piece right there, and that is Loki would have done anything for love and acceptance, and eventually it got him caught up. His family killed, his children entrapped, his wife constantly dutiful to him, capturing poison in a bowl to make sure that it doesn't touch her husband's face. And ironically, her name means curse breaker. And she sits there in servitude to her husband because of the consequences of doing everything it took to be accepted, the consequences of shapeshifting and trying your hardest to be loved and accepted and whatnot. And it's funny because with Odin, he just wanted to know. There is it's like a heart and a mind. Odin just wanted to know everything, to do everything, to experience everything, to see everything, to witness everything. He would spread himself far and wide with his ravens just to observe and learn and things like that. And sacrifice. It was a huge thing. What would it take to have that, acquire that knowledge? Who can I sacrifice? Can I sacrifice you? Can I sacrifice me? What is sacrifice? What does that mean? And how big of a sacrifice do you need? Well, perhaps, let's be honest. Loki and Odin had an extremely intimate relationship, not one just bound by blood, but perhaps a sexual experience. And many other intimate things that happen between two men who are so deeply enveloped within their own desires, such as Loki fitting in and belonging to something or somebody and being just enmeshed in somebody. The true codependency and narcissism, that is Loki and Odin. Loki being extremely codependent, and even though he is always portrayed as such a villain, such a villain, such a villain. Oh, he cut Sif's hair. Oh, like she wasn't cheating on her fucking husband. Oh, did he really do such a bad thing? No. Just kidding. Because of his ability to witness, to want to be a part of, I think that he saw too many things. He saw too many things that he had a real true issue with, and yet had to like sit there and laugh about and like be hee hee ho ho. But on the inside, it's probably filled with resentment because all of these people receive recognition, sacrifice, perhaps. I'm sure that within the culture in Norse and sometimes Germanic cultures, there were sacrifices made to certain gods and deities. But the ones for Loki are never spoken of. They're never spoken of. And in fact, there was an extreme amount of slander brought up against him and for him. And there is no true evidence that there was a cult for him that worshipped him. You know what I'm saying? He was just always like depicted as that annoying fucker, son of a bitch, piece of shit asshole over there doing things. It's Loki, you know. But then if you go into other cultures, you will find his name shifted slightly, and that they leave teeth out for him, or the top of milk, they leave it out for him. And you'll notice that within certain avenues and crevices of these dark alleys, you'll find people who love him, who can relate and understand such a deep need to feel a connection after being so widely displaced by everything. You know, the need to integrate the outcast because of their, like I said, had Loki not existed, these gods would not even have a story worth listening to. Do you understand? And like I said, back to Loki and Odin's intimacy, there is a brotherhood. There is that exchange of blood and fluids and genetic material and submission. I would assume, if you look at it the way through this perspective that I'm speaking, Loki probably submitted himself to Odin so Odin could go forward and learn more. You know what I mean? Savior is so... There's just a specific ritual that has to happen. There's a specific alchemical shift that needs to happen within the person for things to happen. And for those things to happen internally, you have to put pieces in places externally. You have to put every piece on the board in a certain area and pattern and design for the psychological seeds to grow and sprout and bloom, and for the knowledge to truly be acquired within yourself. But let's be honest, I think when it gets down to it, not just like Loki submitting himself to what Odin needed because they were brothers and they were in it together, you know what I mean, till the end, it doesn't matter. Odin sacrificed Loki and his children and called them monsters and eventually destroyed the whole world. Now, why did he do that? Maybe he wanted to know what that felt like, to destroy an entire planet, to destroy an entire cosmos. Maybe that was the knowledge Odin truly was seeking. What does absolute divine, deep feminine darkness of destruction look like? What does that look like? Well, let's bind the great wolf with things that you cannot see or hear, things that are and are not. Let's throw Hela into hell. Let's cast the great serpent into the waters around the earth and bind it. Like, let's take all of these things that are products of a child that needed attention and love and acceptance. Let's cast all of these fractals of this entity, of this being, into divine madness. And then let's have his beautiful wife lose her 2 children because they are ripped apart like animals. And then Loki is bound by the entrails of his son to a rock, under a mountain, under a volcano, until Ragnarok. Allegedly, in certain myths. It shifts around with each culture. It moves, it bobs. It's like a buoy out in the ocean, moving with the waves and things. But essentially, it's out there. So, All I'm saying right now, I feel so silly. All I'm saying right now is me and Odin have some issues. But also, I do enjoy the archetype of Loki. And right now, I'm just exploring that realm, understanding where the shit falls, where it falls, and also how I relate to these stories and how they're important to me. Also, like, hmm, understanding that each story has an extraordinary amount of depth to it. It's not just the words you read on a page, or the words you hear from one person, or the words you hear from another person, or the words you read on a different book page, or the words you read on in runic carvings and rune stones. It's not just those words. There's something that happens with you when you read these words. There is a whole grove within yourself of trees, and all of these trees have different fruits, and you have to pick them and figure out which ones really give your life more vitality and meaning and purpose, right? I feel like just it's fun because who knows what life's meaning truly is, and who gives a fuck? We're here, aren't we? So it's just fun. It's fun. It's playing to sit there and research and envelop yourself in these characters' lives and see how it affected the culture. And also, like I said, people were sacrificing things to Odin, to Thor. Loki is rarely spoken of unless it is in harsh words, and yet he's the one closest to human nature, ironically, and codependency. So a lot of people who are outcasted or in the queer community and other things can truly identify with Loki because he's honest, he's real, and yeah, he does some things that can be characterized as shady and shifty. But have you ever resented somebody? Have you ever witnessed somebody doing something so nefarious and getting away with it that you wanted to see them fucking trip? You wanted to see something bad happen to them. How long are you going to sit there and witness these nefarious acts without doing something? So what? He cut all her hair off. So what? He told everybody who was fucking everybody at the party. How long are you going to sit there and take shit? How long are you gonna sit there and take shit from an entire culture, from everybody, for the entire existence of human beings knowing your name? How long are you going to take shit? How long are you going to let them slander your name? How long are you going to hide the truth within metaphors? So he said something that was real and true. Nobody liked it. And they were like, shut up, stop talking about it. We don't want to hear it. Like, we're cool. We're better than you. People sacrifice things to us. People know we exist. They don't like you. Yeah, well, I know what you are. You fucked me. Remember that? Oh, I'm sorry. Your husband's sitting here too? That's weird. I fucked him too. Like, he's so funny. I think it's hilarious. That's funny. I've done that. I got so drunk one time. I told everybody their shit. And then I got in trouble. So when I found this story of Loki, after years of me feeling like horseshit, when I saw that there was a god somewhere in time and space who did the same thing I did, how could you not love somebody like that? How could you not have empathy for such a deity? I got so drunk at a party one time that I got into everybody's face and I told them everything about themselves. And I laughed and I laughed and I cried and I laughed and I was kicked out of the house. Oops. I was like, and you're fucking the judge, and he's married. Oh my God. How long are you going to sit in your codependency and need? I mean, and perhaps he resented himself. I think I resented myself when I look back and I relate myself to these stories. And of course, it's just individual. But when I relate myself to the stories of Loki, and sometimes to the stories of Odin, when I put myself in their shoes and I go, I've done similar things such as this. How funny. I I thought I was alone. I thought I made a big fuck up. But if you're telling me a god has made the similar mistake of telling everybody the truth at a party after drinking too much, oops. I stopped drinking after that. Anyways, when you're sober the next day and everyone looks at you with such disgust and hatred and wants you dead. How can you not? Sassmeister 3000 Loki, is that you? For I have done the same. Perhaps there is a kindred spirit there. And so what I'm trying to say is perhaps he resented himself for constantly putting himself in these situations. Oh, I had to go fuck this horse to get you guys a free wall. And then I gave birth to this beautiful creature and I gave it to Odin. That's a sacrifice. Here's one of my children. He sacrificed his body, his everything. Loki had always sacrificed everything for Odin. Everything. Not just for Odin, but for all of Odin's fucking friends. Of course he resented himself to an extent. I'd hate myself too. In fact, I did when I was so codependent. And I was watching all of these people do these things and get away with them and laugh about it and feeling so confident in their, like I said before, their nefarious activities. I was mad at myself. Why am I here? What am I doing? And I had done the dance. I had participated in my own personal Lokasena. When the dog star was rising, I drank too much and I told the truth. And the next day, I was filled with divine regret of being born. It was so painful. So I found a kindred spirit within this deity and his stories, and also sometimes within Odin's stories. But I have an issue at large with the people Odin seems to collect. His little followers, they're very strange. I've spoken to women who, I've spoken to a woman before who was actually so in depth with Odin. She truly felt like a divine marriage between the two of her and him. And that was an interesting conversation to have with somebody who has dedicated so much of their life to a deity that they claim marriage. Do you understand? Like there is a divine unity with their souls, almost a sacrifice of self to this deity and allowing them to integrate and intertwine their stories within your own life to inevitably wind up serving their archetype within the divine collective consciousness. So I find it extremely interesting and sad that, eventually Odin sacrificed Loki. And I was like thinking about, the codependency and narcissism within their relationship. And I've been rewatching American Gods, and it brought up a lot of these themes again within me. And I thought it to be extremely peculiar to witness these two boys dancing in such a way, and Odin at large and Loki behind the scenes. And in other cultures, there are similar trickster archetypes where it's like Elegua and Isu. And other deities who also share a very similar thread, and perhaps it is the mercurial, perhaps it's a dance of Mercury and Saturn. And yet perhaps it's a dance of just Mercury and its many faces and masks that it wears between all levels of the ladder that it climbs and goes down and skitters across as quickly as possible. So, I mean, we see many things in many myths, but my favorite myths to go back to are my favorites. They're the ones that I resonate with. And within this new Western American culture, yeah, it's very interesting. And when I was a child, I used to watch The Mask all the time with Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz, and my father's name was Emilio, and so Milo, the dog, so they called my father Milo, and my name is Emily, and I was supposed to be a boy. I was supposed to be a boy, so I was supposed to be a junior, but they said, we could fix this. Even though she cannot be Emilio Jr., she could be Emily. Take on the feminine version of my father's name. And so I would watch The Mask, and I didn't know that The Mask was Loki's mask. I didn't even know. So as a young child, those seeds were already there. I already had an understanding of what Loki was in this Western culture in the early 90s. And I would watch it over and over and over again. And perhaps it wasn't a good movie for a child to watch, but I did. I don't know. It's just what my parents put on. And so it was just always in the dark recesses of my mind. I guess there has always been Loki to an extent. But also, like I said, I have an issue with certain people that follow Odin. So I always question them. I always ask them certain questions when I talk to them. Just suss out, who the fuck are you? I see what you're wearing. I see your symbols. I see your peacock. I see you peacocking. Riddle me this. And I'll start asking about their favorite authors. I'll start asking about certain things that to me would indicate that they're not just some kind of racist skinhead. Because I'm an amalgamation of cultures within my body and different backgrounds. So I always have to ask questions before I talk to somebody about Norse paganism, because there's a tendency to die if you are not fully white or whatever. There's this extreme amount of they're gross skinheads. Let's call them skinheads. So let's call them racist skinheads. And so they're gross. It's nasty, and so it's also a fucking perversion to me of that, and that's a lot to digest. That's not something I like to sit there and look at and be like. It makes me uncomfortable. Number one, to talk to somebody about Norse paganism or Germanic things, and immediately get met with like some pretty deep dark things, like them empathizing with certain worldviews that I do not empathize with. So that's a whole thing. That's a whole thing. I'm not gonna get into it right now. So yeah, whenever there was this. I was at an ice cream shop, and there was a boy there, and he was openly reading a book about Norse paganism, and he had a hammer and certain identifying things you could identify. If you're good with symbols, you can identify your people very quickly, or you can identify people very quickly in their values, because they'll wear it, they'll peacock to an extent. And so I said, "What's that?" Well, this is just, reading a book about. And it ended up being. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Have you heard of this book? Oh, no, I just. I see. Okay. Okay. You don't really have to get into it with people. You just have to ask the right questions. And they will physically react in a certain way, and you'll know if they're your people or not. Ironically, I used to work at this shop. I always say these things. And there was a man who had Masonic ties. I just openly talk about this shit. So I openly talk about the weirdest shit. There was a man and he had like Masonic ties, right? And he had been initiated in the ways and whatnot. But I was always silent and observing and smiling and playing the role of the counter girl and doing what they needed. But I would watch him and we would have conversations sometimes. And he came in and I said, he came in with this long, big hat and a large coat. And you could only see like a certain part of his face. And the brim was so wide. And he had a cane. And I said, hey. And he looked at me kind of as a long hat sideways. You kind of look like Odin. And he went, that's one of the main gods that I worship and work with within my personal coven, because he did something. And I just smiled and I looked at him, and there's like, oh, you don't have to say a lot. You don't really have to say a lot. You just have to witness and look and see and say just enough. And you'll see it in their eyes. You'll see the kindred fire, the spark. I see you. You see me? I see you. You know? It was fun seeing that. It was fun. And then after that, we were able to really talk about things. He spoke of things and I asked him questions and he was silent. And his wife was a fantastic woman too. She was very beautiful. And she was so funny because she would always say, she would always say, he's either the greatest man alive or the world's greatest con. I hope he's well. I hope they're well. But yeah, there are some of his followers. Like you could smell them. You could smell them. You could see them. You could see them. You could see him on them. I can see you. I can see you on them. And then it's very. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. It is internal. And yet there is an external. And I think whenever you really get into it, you dive. The way I get into things, I'm going to say this and then leave. The way I learned how to swim, my mother threw me into the deep end as a baby. There was many times in my life I thought, man, this bitch is trying to kill me. Not just like through being born. We had different blood types. She was believed type O negative. And her body tried to kill me in birth. So they had to do things in order to make sure that I didn't die coming through those gates. And but there's many, many times I thought to myself, this bitch is trying to kill me. And so I spoke about it before with the female initiation into the underworld. My mother sent me there all the time on errands. My mother always sent me to the underworld on errands. Go say hi to your father, Oh, by the way, can you get a thing of sugar? And while you're down there, say hi to your father and flip him off for me, will you? Kind of thing. So the way I learned how to swim is she threw me into the deep end and did not save me. And eventually, after looking up and begging for help and screaming and crying, she did. She did save me. Just kidding, she didn't. I'm lying. She did not save me. I figured out how to swim. No, I could have died. I could have seriously died. That's how she teaches. That's how she taught me everything. figure it out or die. And so, I am not like that at all with how I teach things. But like I said, she sent me to the underworld a lot. But there is it's just this very sad, heartbreaking thing to witness, the dance between Loki and Odin, and the dance they do away from each other. And so, like I said before, like I said before, Loki eventually submitted himself, and Odin sacrificed him. And yeah, perhaps it's to kickstart the end of the world, but eventually, the Great Wolf breaks his chains. Eventually, everything unravels. Now, did Odin sacrifice Loki like that on purpose? They were so intimate. He knew what buttons to push for him. He knew what would happen. He could see. He knew what would happen had he not invited Loki to that party, or had Loki not been able to go to that party, or had Loki been purposefully outcasted. He was just as good as Odin. They were blood brothers. There's a rune. And yeah, so now did he sacrifice him to eventually learn what forbidden knowledge is? The destruction of the cosmos? Maybe. Or what was it? Why did he do that to his brother? Why did he do that to his lover? Why did he do that to his friend? That's something I have not been initiated into. Why was that sacrifice made? Was it so important? Was it so important to do that to somebody who would love you forever? I don't think so. Well, I can't speak for Odin, and I really can't speak for Loki. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go on that. Yep, I'm gonna leave on that. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.